The Port of Kingston is now one of the fastest growing ports in the entire hemisphere, and we are determined to ensure that our infrastructure keeps pace with that growth. We are undertaking a series of transformational projects that together will create the largest concentration of near-port logistic lands anywhere in the Caribbean. The first of these is the $80 million Westland project, already underway, which will add 15 acres to the Kingston Freeport Terminal, increasing cargo storage capacity by more than 25%. The second involves the realignment of Marcus Garvey Drive to the northeast of Tinson-Pen and the incorporation of the Tinson-Pen lands into an expanded near-port corridor. No, it's our constituency. A portion of these lands is already being actively utilized for automobile logistics, a clear signal of Kingston's emergence as a regional hub in a dynamic sector and a preview of the far greater potential that lies ahead. Madam Speaker, inadequate drainage infrastructure along this corridor has resulted in disruption of operations from even moderate rainfall. The National Works Agency, in collaboration with local and international consultants, has completed comprehensive studies for a drainage system designed to efficiently convey stormwater to Hunts Bay. We will move decisively under NARA to finalize the designs and implement this solution. The truth is, Mr. Speaker, we can't expand the port without doing this drainage project. Madam Speaker, speaking of drainage, the Kingston metropolitan area is urgently in need of serious work on its most critical drainage infrastructure. That is the Sandy Gully, which is the city's main defense against flooding. This was built some, 70 years ago? Almost 60 years ago? More than 60 years ago. So, and it really has not had a major overall. And just to explain to the country how that drain works and why we need the drain. If there is a weather system that is coming off the Kingston Harbor and it is going across Kingston, it is going to meet the hills of St. Andrew. And what that will do as the precipitation moves against the hills is that all of that will fall as rain. It will come down the hill, and if it doesn't get into the Sandy Gully and go into the sea, it will flood the Kingston Plain. And so that's why it was built like that. So it actually takes the water coming off the hills for any heavy precipitation. But the gully as it is, because the inverts and the other infrastructure that support it, they are aged. And so they are falling apart. So under NARA, yes, thankfully, the gully was not damaged. The Sandy Gully was not damaged by Melissa. But because we have a resilience mandate, we know that this is a key piece of infrastructure that is needed for Jamaica's resilience, and therefore the reconstruction of the Sandy Gully will be a major project. Anchoring the entire logistics ecosystem is the Caymanas Special Economic Zone, Jamaica's flagship logistics project. The Caymanas Special Economic Zone is designed to complete Jamaica's transition from a transshipment hub to a fully fledged logistics center for the region and beyond. The first phase will be developed over 4 years at a cost of $8 billion, covering 200 acres of the 700-acre property, generating hundreds of direct and indirect jobs during construction alone. Taken together, the Westland, Tinson-Pen, and the Caymanas Special Economic Zone project, which has started. These three investments to assemble the largest block of near-port logistic lands in the region, placing Jamaica firmly on the pathway for fulfilling our national ambition of becoming the fourth global node in logistics alongside Singapore, Dubai, and Rotterdam. Madam Speaker, these are the exact words that were said by the former Minister of Industry and Commerce, who is now the Member of Parliament for Western St. Andrew, which shows that, and he knows, I've always, where credit is due, give credit. You don't have to originate all the ideas, right? The brain is not all in one head. And how I see myself, yes, I like to think myself as a great thinker and conceptualizer, but I prefer to be thought of as the great builder, the one who does it. Madam Speaker, when major disaster strikes, the ability of the state to function, to coordinate, to communicate, to make decisions, to serve the people depends on having facilities that can withstand the impact and continue operating in its aftermath. Hurricane Melissa exposed the vulnerability of the government itself. Jamaica currently houses its ministries and departments and agencies in a patchwork of aging, scattered buildings, many of them structurally inadequate, poorly connected to each other, and wholly unprepared for the demands that a major disaster places on government operations. Madam Speaker, the government will advance the development of the government campus at National Hero Circle as a national priority. The vision brings together Jamaica's Houses of Parliament, key ministries and agencies into a single purpose-built campus. In the post-military context, the government campus is more than a statement of national pride. It is a strategic investment in the continuity of government. Madam Speaker, this Parliament could never have withstood Hurricane Melissa, or even a slightly lower hurricane. And I think it is now a moot point, Mr. Speaker. I think every member of Parliament here serving in this building would have to agree. The building has served us well, put it that way. But it really cannot carry us much further.
Right time. Right time.
Madam Speaker, resilience is not only our road and bridges. Resilience must also include our health facilities. Kingston Public Hospital as a historic and venerated as it is, has stood for over 300 years. 300 years. It is vulnerable, and had Hurricane Melissa struck Kingston, the consequences could have been more catastrophic, potentially damaging or destroying a major national referral hospital at the very moment when the residents of the surrounding area would need it the most. That would have added a dangerous new layer of public health crisis to an already severe natural disaster. We have to take note of our vulnerabilities and address them before they manifest. It is imperative that a new Kingston Public Hospital be built to modern international standards with resilience, continuity of care, and disaster preparedness at its core. I am pleased to note that the National Reconstruction and Resilience Authority will lead its construction, and Cabinet has already given approval for the acquisition of lands to facilitate the new facility. Madam Speaker, both our major international airports sit adjacent to the sea, and we are vulnerable to storm surges and the long-term effects of sea level rise. When Melissa struck, the operational pressure on both facilities was immense. The question that we must answer honestly and urgently What happens if one or both of our major international airports is rendered inoperable by a natural disaster? The answer cannot be that Jamaica has no answer. Vernamfield has been discussed as a development opportunity for decades. The vision of an aerotropolis, an airport city that would anchor Jamaica's ambition to become the world's fourth logistics hub has appeared in strategic documents. I've spoken about it numerous times. Cabinet decisions and development plans have been made since the 2000s. The long-term vision still remains our aspiration. Former Minister Mike Henry, I'm certain that if he is listening, would be happy to hear that the Vernamfield, and that's the airstrip you're looking at, which was built during the World War II era, that by and large the concrete is still intact. It has over 2,000 acres of land around it. A premium piece of real estate is used for drag racing, when that piece of real estate should be our strategic backup and where we make strategic investment to eventually make it into a full-blown airport. This is why we will advance the Vernamfield Light project, a focus phase rehabilitation of the existing airstrip to create an international airdrome capable of accommodating the largest commercial aircraft in operation. And this means that in the event of a hurricane, earthquake, or other disaster that renders Norman Manley or Sangster International Airport inoperable, or both, Jamaica will have an inland facility capable of receiving wide-body jets, humanitarian relief aircraft, cargo planes, and military transport. The continuity of our aviation connectivity, which is the lifeline of our ecotourism, of our tourism economy, and our import supply chain, cannot depend entirely on two coastal strips of land exposed to the sea. Beyond its resilience function, the Vernamfield Light project will deliver immediate operational value across a range of activities, for example, providing dedicated facilities for international private jets, purpose-built hangar facilities, aviation training and certification, as well as serving as the Maritime Air and Cyber Command base for the JDF. Madam Speaker, the slide now being displayed shows the national highway network, including all planned highway projects. What it illustrates is a vision that is within our grasp. A continuous, modern highway network encircling the entire island, connecting every parish, every port, every airport, and every major economic center into a single, seamless system. The objectives of this network are: one, to reduce travel times and transportation costs for businesses and families, to open new corridors for agriculture, industrial, and tourism development, and to strengthen resilience by ensuring that no community is ever again isolated because of a disaster, and of course, to create new lands for low-income housing. Hurricane Melissa has, among other things, reinforced that infrastructure cannot continue to be planned, designed, and built in silos. That approach has cost us dearly. Roads are rehabilitated and then torn up again because a pipeline issue was not anticipated. Drainage deficiencies short the life of otherwise sound roadworks. Slope instability undermines the investments made without adequate assessment of the surrounding terrain. This fragmented reactive model is inefficient, expensive, and wholly inconsistent with the scale and ambition of our national reconstruction vision. We are therefore moving decisively towards integrated infrastructure planning, a framework in which roads, drainage, water, sewage, utility corridors, slope stability, and climate risk are considered together from the design stage and sequenced into disciplined way through implementation. Integration planning must be matched by stronger infrastructure governance, part of what involves a long overdue, that is part of the work which involves a long overdue reform of how we classify and manage the national road network. At present, roads of vastly different purposes, economic significance, and strategic importance are treated in broadly the same way. A modern road designation framework will allow us to distinguish clearly between local access roads, parish connectors, strategic economic corridors, tourism routes, agricultural links, and emergency and evacuation corridors. Madam Speaker, what this will do is to inform the budget. Right now, how are roads repaired? All right, so the government, through a process like this, identify strategically important roads. And those roads are usually networked. And all of these roads that are built centrally, they stand up. And they carry quite a bit of volume and maintain our connectivity. But a large part of the road repair and maintenance budget is politically driven. MPs feel, and I feel the same, that I must have influence over the road construction and repair budget. So in other words, road repairs are also influenced by political pressure. Now, maybe that's not a bad model, but what it does is it helps to fragment how the limited road repair budget is spent. What happens is that the road repair budget is broken down essentially by constituency and by the effective lobbying of members of parliament. Now, the truth is that that strategy may have served well. But what it creates is a great deal of fragmentation, because every year we spend billions of dollars. But if you look at the road network, you can't really say that you have developed a road network. And at some point, as a country, we have to say, look, we need to make impact with the money that we are spending. And so that is what the One Road Authority is being designed to do. I know there is concern that the One Road Authority is going to take away autonomy from parish councils. No leader of the opposition, that's not what it is being designed to do. So one of the things that we're doing is to do a proper accounting for the roads, so we know how many roads we actually have, how many miles of roads. Then we go through a process of a proper categorization of roads. Then we look at the roads in terms of their strategic value. Are they connecting roads? Do they carry critical manufacturing? Are they critical for evacuation? All kinds. So we look at these things, and then we develop a proper maintenance plan. The first phase of that proper maintenance plan is the SPARK program. Already, the SPARK program is supposed to do over 600 roads. You've gone about 120 roads have been done across the island. I am sure that almost all MPs who are here from the last term can say that there is a road being done in their constituency, a road or two. But aside from developing a kind of structured budget for the maintenance of roads, Madam Speaker, we must develop standards for how the roads are maintained. And there must be an entity that holds road users to account when they destroy the roads. Madam Speaker, it is a great pain to me to drive on some of our very important urban roads, arterial roads, and you see the wanton spillage of concrete. And it's as if they do it with impunity. Well, I am putting all of those persons who are spilling concrete on our roads on notice. When the NARA is established, you will be prosecuted. The One Road Authority. Forget, you're listening. The One Road Authority. Because that entity will also have the power to prosecute.
And something too.
Madam Speaker, I want to turn very quickly to housing. This year, the National Housing Trust marks its 50th anniversary. The NHT has stood as one of the most enduring and consequential institutions in Jamaica's development architecture, a testament to the vision of former Prime Minister Michael Mann. Hail the man. As I said, he did some good things, but we should also note, because the member from St. Andrew Southwest, Southeast, saying, well, if you're going to talk about history, you must talk about it completely. You must give the full story. Right. So the full story of the NHT is that, of course, the idea to create the NHT was that of Michael Manley. But the NHT was, as you would know, no, I was there. Of course I was. No, but history is not for the people who live it, it's for the people who read it. So, no, you read it. You have to read history. You have to read history, because the truth is, leader of the opposition, there are people who live the experience, right? But when they actually read it, they say, but it's different, because when you have to sit down and put everything into context and bring things into consideration that the person experiencing it would not be able to interpret, you get a fuller experience when you're reading the analytic of the event. But Madam Speaker, the point is that the NHT was formed out of the NIS.
Yes.
Yes. In other words, the fund that we created, the National Insurance Fund, which when we created, the PNP objected to it, turned it around, called it sin, never wanted it to be done. So now what happened is that, of course, the initial establishment of its structure and the funding came from the NIS. So, I mean, it's just a part of the context of the NHT. But to the credit of former Prime Minister Michael Manley, this is an institution that has served Jamaica well. Madam Speaker, when Hurricane Melissa struck, the NHT did not wait. It moved quickly, decisively, and with compassion that the scale of the crisis demanded. Approximately 30,000 mortgages across 7 of the hardest hit parishes received an automatic 6-month mortgage moratorium, providing immediate relief for mortgagors whose homes remain uninhabitable. That moratorium has been extended. That moratorium, the NHT has extended it until the beneficiary is able to restore their home. A special disaster relief grant of up to $500,000 was made available for contributors for contributors who demonstrated a need, prioritizing those unable to take on additional borrowing, including pensioners and other vulnerable groups. Over 5,500 applications have been received under the grant facility alone, with nearly 1,800 already processed and close to $1 billion disbursed. The NHT has also procured 2,500 semi-permanent housing solutions at a cost of US $19 million for families who lost their homes entirely. The first 300 units are on island and are being cleared for distribution. So finally, we will have some of these modular housing solutions, semi-permanent housing solutions. The NHT also introduced a hurricane relief loan of up to $3.5 million at concessional 2% interest rate to support essential repairs, disaster resilience upgrading, including reinforced roofing and hurricane shelter and supplementation of insurance claims. Madam Speaker, the leader of the opposition said he hasn't seen any program insisting that restoration must be done to code and standard. I can assure you, Madam Speaker, that this program under the NHT, that the persons who are restoring their homes must do so according to the relevant local building codes. I'm pleased to announce the program will be extended through to March 2027, ensuring that families across the island can access concessional financing to rebuild, not just the standard that existed before, but to an even higher standard of resilience. So this loan program will be extended to next year, March. Madam Speaker, let me give the House and Jamaica a clear picture of where the NHT housing delivery stands. As at the 31st of January 2026, the NHT is actively managing a housing train line of over 41,000 solutions at various stages of development across the island. This includes approximately 10,700 units currently under construction, and you see them, those are telling you where they are all across Jamaica. Nearly 6,000 at contract award stage, and 11,500 in procurement and negotiations, and more than 11,600 in planning and design. Two major new developments have commenced at the Longville Meadows in Clarendon and Friendship Phase 2 in St. Elizabeth, together totaling 2,800 solutions. In the coming financial year, the NHT has projected housing expenditure of approximately $50 billion with a further subsidy of approximately $21 billion under the external financing mortgage program. This represents one of the most ambitious housing programs in the history of the NHT, covering developments in St. Catherine, Trelawney, Manchester, Clarendon, Westmoreland, St. Thomas, St. Mary, Kingston, and beyond. Madam Speaker, I need to directly address the public debate surrounding the annual transfer from the NHT to support the budget. The opposition has made much of the annual $11.4 billion transfer from the NHT. In the face of fiscal pressures created by Hurricane Melissa, the government had no realistic alternative but to extend the drawdown. Were the drawdown to be discontinued, the $11.4 billion would have to be found elsewhere, resulting in additional taxes beyond those announced. I fully acknowledge that the Jamaican workers contribute to the NHT with the expectation that those funds will be used for housing. That expectation is legitimate, and the government takes it seriously. But we have to be clear on what the real challenges are and how to solve them. First, let me give some deeper insight into the $11.4 billion. $11.4 billion is the gross amount that the NHT transfers to the government. Gross. This is net off against the statutory deductions and taxes that the NHT itself is obliged to pay to the government. Technically, therefore, the government gets approximately $7 to $7.5 billion net from the NHT. I think that is a very important contextual element of the problem. No, every year. Every year. Every year. So, because sometimes we run with the headlines, but we don't really look at the details. All right. Second, the NHT remains a solid, well-capitalized body that is not a fiscal risk to the government. The NHT has not in any way been impaired in its ability to satisfy demand for mortgage loans, even at 0% interest rates. To further improve the cash flow under the external financing mortgage program, NHT contributors can access their NHT mortgage through approved partner institutions instead of going through the NHT itself. The NHT's portion of the loan attracts its usual NHT interest rate, even though the loan is processed externally. Furthermore, there has been no issue, very important point, Madam Speaker, there has been no issue of misuse or mismanagement of any NHT fund under my administration, like the Outameni scandal under the PhD. Talk about corruption. Yes. If the funds remained with the NHT, they would largely have been invested in government securities and sat on the balance sheet as lending capacity, waiting for projects that too often do not materialize. Not because the money is unavailable, but because, one, we do not have enterprise scale contractors in sufficient numbers. That's a reality. Number two, we do not have large swathes of developable land that is close to where people want to live or where sufficient infrastructure exists, so that all that is required to do is to put in the last mile. This is why we are building new roads to open up new lands for housing. That is what we have done in the East, in St. Thomas and Portland, and now we're doing it in St. Elizabeth and Westmoreland. But even when we open up new lands through roads and highways, it takes time to get the infrastructure to the last mile. We have an over-bureaucratization of the development and approvals and permitting process. We are working to simplify and accelerate this, which is why you would have heard about FAST, about NARA. All of these are attempts to accelerate the process. Collectively, these factors mean that the cost of construction in the affordable segment of the housing market makes viable projects difficult to assemble. So the challenge, Madam Speaker, is not that the funds that we take from the NHT deprives the contributor of an opportunity to own a house. That's not accurate. The challenge is, because even though we have taken the funds, in this administration, we have done more than any other. Yeah. To increase the size of the funds that contributors can access from the NHT. We have increased the number of persons who can co-make or co-join.
Reduce interest.
But more than that, we have reduced the interest rate. Can you imagine you can get a mortgage for zero interest rate? Zero.
Absolutely.
Right? So in other words, what we have done, oh, very high, 60% of the mortgages are 0%. No, 60% of the yes. So if you earn a certain level, you get a 0% interest rate. And 60% of mortgages pay actually 0% interest rate. So there's this notion that somehow the funds deprive.
Never reduce interest rate. Never reduce interest rate.
So the NHT, as I've said, offers 0% interest rates to low-income earners.
Yes. Yes.
But demand for mortgages is still limited because of the availability of homes in the price segment that the contributors would be able to afford. Now, this is an important point to note. Further subsidizing demand only ends up increasing prices. As we have increased the contributors' access to financing, what we see happening is an increase in the price of the house. In fact, every time we increase, the price of the house moves with the increases that we give in terms of the funds that they can access. And that tells you more than anything that there is a supply side problem.
Yeah.
That is really the issue. How do we expand the supply of houses? And we outline the structural issues that exist, which are not all NHT problems. So further subsidizing demand only ends up increasing prices. We have seen this clearly every time we have increased the NHT loan limit. Prices rise to absorb the additional lending capacity because supply does not keep pace. Jamaica's housing crisis is not a financing crisis, it is a supply crisis. And no amount of money sitting on the NHT's balance sheet will build a single new home without the land, the infrastructure, the approvals, the construction capacity to put it to work. What we need urgently and at scale is a ramping up of housing supply. And when we speak of supply at the scale Jamaica requires, we must think boldly. And that is why this administration developed the Greater Bernard Lodge Development Program as a demonstration of what becomes possible when government planners and the private sector are in common vision around serious commitment and execution. I urge members who have not yet seen what is happening in Bernard Lodge to go and take a look at Bernard Lodge and see the housing that is going there. The major large-scale master plan development will be the Inwood development. And this NHT is tasked to lead the master planning of this development. Madam Speaker, I want to talk about some new measures to increase accessibility and affordability. While we work to increase housing supply, we are always working to ensure that homes we build are accessible to Jamaicans who need them the most. I'm pleased to announce that effective July 1, 2026, teachers, nurses, firefighters, and members of our security forces and defense forces will benefit from a specially reduced mortgage interest rate based on their length of service. For those with 5 to 10 years of service, the applicable interest rate will be reduced by 1%, and for those with service of 10 years or more, the rate will be reduced by 2%. For young Jamaicans under 35, the NHT will reserve a minimum of 20% of scheme units, doubling from the previous allocation of 10%, and will provide an advance $2 million to assist with deposit requirements for open market purchases.
That's excellent. Very good.
Also effective July 1, the home improvement loan waiting period will be reduced from 7 to 5 years, giving existing homeowners faster access to funds for maintenance, security, green energy upgrades, and expansion. All of these were commitments made in our 2025 manifesto. Madam Speaker, in commemoration of the 50th anniversary, the NHD will break ground on 2 new state parks. I'd already announced one in Manchester, and that is being developed as we speak. They're trying to come to some agreement with the local municipality as to the exact location as to where that should go. And second, the second, Madam Speaker, is in Kingston and St. Andrew. We have to build a park in Kingston and St. Andrew. We remember Emancipation Park. But, Madam Speaker,
That was low. That was That was low. That was low. That's the low. I'm becoming a captain. That was I'm becoming a captain.
Madam Speaker, we have started discussions. Madam Speaker, we have started discussions with His Excellency the Governor General, developing a park on sections of the King's House land. Park Madam Speaker, that park, it will be particularly developed to deal with the needs of our seniors. A place where they can exercise and walk securely. So the NHT again will have that responsibility. Madam Speaker, any serious conversation about land use, productivity and housing must confront one of Jamaica's most visible failure in land utilization, our blighted urban spaces. Across parts of downtown Kingston, Spanish Town and Montego Bay, vacant lots and derelict buildings occupy land that should be among the most economically productive. These sites sit close to infrastructure, jobs, and services. The potential is to unlock them. And what we will be doing, Madam Speaker, is to give the framework for unlocking these lands. Since 1995, the Urban Renewal Tax Relief Act has attempted to incentivize investments in such areas, but the results have been limited. Just 56 projects approved in 3 decades. Last year, I indicated that we would overhaul this framework to make it fully fit for purpose, and that work led by the UDC with key stakeholders now well advanced. The new framework will strengthen the core incentive by allowing developers to apply the existing tax credit against up to 100% of income tax liability rather than the current 50%. Madam Speaker, this is a major change. For priority projects, including developments in severely blighted areas, affordable housing, and critical public facilities, the credit will increase from the current 33.33% to 40%. Unused tax credits will also become fully transferable, allowing them to move with the property when it is sold. A change that removes a major barrier to investment and supports the development and reinvestment model. The framework will also support the wider development ecosystem. Financing for approved projects will receive tax-exempt interest income for up to 8 years. Commercial tenants will be able to deduct 200% of rent, and first purchasers of homes in approved developments will receive a property tax exemption in their first year. So we are looking at a whole suite of incentives to attract investment into urban blighted communities. To address one of the most persistent obstacles, slow approvals, all permits, development approvals, and tax authorizations will be processed through a single digital portal managed by the UDC, dramatically reducing the processing time. Finally, the program will expand beyond downtown Kingston to include sections of Central Kingston, Vineyard Town, Swallowfield, Olympic Gardens, Spanish Town, and Cape Manners in St. Catherine, Montego Bay in St. James, Port Antonio in Portland, and Morant Bay in St. Thomas. The new framework will also explicitly include disaster recovery and reconstruction areas, covering sections of Black River, Fonthill, Junction, and Santa Cruz in St. Elizabeth, White House, and Negril in Westmoreland and Hanover, and Falmouth in Trelawney. So, Madam Speaker, we are going, as I say, hard on attracting investment in urban blighted areas. Madam Speaker, some technical and legislative work remains, but we are targeting the first quarter of 2026-2027 for the new urban renewal framework to come into effect. Madam Speaker, we have a further incentive for redevelopment and relocation work that will be needed to be undertaken in the following parishes: Trelawney, Hanover, Westmoreland, and St. Elizabeth. For the next 2 years, transfer tax on properties in these parishes, Trelawney, Hanover, Westmoreland, and St. Elizabeth, will be reduced by 50%. The purpose of this is that in these parishes, this is where we will have the most need for relocation, which we will need to be able to sell property and dispose of property. Many persons want to come out of certain areas. And if we can incentivize this process, it would be in the interest of the restoration and recovery. And therefore, we have taken that decision to give a special transfer tax break in these areas. Madam Speaker, a vision of this scale demands not only clarity of ambition, but clarity of financing. And let me be direct about how Jamaica intends to pay for what I have described. We will not finance this resurgence through undisciplined borrowing that mortgages the future to pay for the present. Every element of the reconstruction and development program will be financed through a deliberately structured, multi-layered architecture that protects Jamaica's fiscal stability while mobilizing the full range of available resources. The financing rests on 4 distinct pillars: concessional sovereign lending. The core of the US $6.7 billion package secured from our multilateral partners is patient, affordable capital deployed for investment. It will finance the infrastructure backbone of reconstruction where private investment is not possible. So we will invest where public good is established. Private sector mobilization and PPPs. US $2.4 billion out of the US $6.7 billion package is specifically intended to crowd in private capital through public-private partnerships for projects where commercial returns can support private investments. The government provides the enabling condition, private capital provides the execution, scale, and commercial accountability. Climate and resilience financing. We will access dedicated climate financing mechanisms, including the Loss and Damage Fund under the UNFCCC, the Green Climate Fund, and other adaptation instruments to fund coastal protection, resilient infrastructure, and community relocation. Jamaica has paid a disproportionate price for the climate crisis, which it did not create. We intend to claim every dollar of climate finance we are entitled to. And 4, domestic long-term capital. We will mobilize Jamaica's own savings from pension funds and insurance companies. And this is what the recent reforms announced by the Minister of Finance are designed to do. We didn't just announce them in a vacuum. The recent changes in how pension funds and other long-term investment instruments can access and deploy their capital. We are not just hopeful, we are incentivizing them to deploy those capital resources into the projects that are going to be managed and executed under NARA and facilitated through the FAST program. So we have thought out an entire ecosystem of measures. Together, these pillars form a financing architecture that is prudent, diversified, and equal to the task before us. Madam Speaker, there are some critical enablers for this to be done. And I think, Madam Speaker, you will agree and permit me if I have a sip of water. By the way, how much was this one? How much was this one?
This is all at $16.
This is less than $100.
This is 44.
This one is $44. Very nice, very nice. But I have another present for you.
NWC.
Send this over. Give it another one. We have one for you. This is NWC water. NWC water. So this is about $20, right? Of course. That was I brought it here. No, when I heard. So when I heard
it's in your pipe.
when I heard the protestations of the leader of the opposition that water costs more than gas. I mean, so yes. If you bought Avion or some other, but that's not the question. The question is, why would the leader of the opposition go and buy water that costs more than gas when there are other options that are more economical? Madam Speaker, to me, it tells me that I wouldn't trust him with managing my economy.
The most expensive water.
Madam Speaker, what I have described is a resurgent Jamaica, a new Jamaica. But all of this depends on a set of critical enabling conditions that must be in place and must be sustained. There are non-negotiable preconditions for the resurgent Jamaica I have described today to move from vision to reality. Enabler number 1, maintaining debt sustainability and macroeconomic stability. You cannot buy water more expensive than gas. Madam Speaker, absolutely. The first critical enabler is our ability to manage Jamaica's financing with the same discipline and intelligence that we have exhibited over the last decade. Within weeks of Melissa's landfall, the World Bank's rapid assessment estimated physical damage of $8.8 billion. When the full damage and loss assessment led by the Planning Institute of Jamaica was completed in March, capturing not just physical destruction, but direct and indirect economic losses, the figure emerged a huge, staggering $12.2 billion. That is 56.7% of Jamaica's GDP in 2024. Let us put that in full perspective. This is more than 4 times the losses from Hurricane Gilbert, which held for decades the grim distinction of being the most costly hurricane in our history. It is also larger than the FinSac bailout, which cost the country 42% of GDP. The difference, of course, is that FinSac was not an external shock, it was a PNP-created shock. It was a purely domestic homegrown crisis caused by poor policy choices of the PNP administration of the 1990s. It took us 30 years to get back the debt to GDP down to the same level as it was at FinSac. 30 years.
30 years.
And this is the administration that brought it down.
30 years.
Madam Speaker, it is clear that by any measure, we are now dealing with an economic rupture of a scale this country has never confronted. The fiscal consequences strike from both directions at once. Tax revenues falling as economic activity contracts, while the demands on public expenditure surge for relief, for recovery, for restoration of public infrastructure. The central question is, how do we finance the deficit? The opposition has made some suggestions. The first is the introduction of electronic invoicing. This is something that has already been contemplated, but to get it to implementation, you have to first of all build out the digital infrastructure. Madam Speaker, it is a good recommendation. We're not naysaying it. That we were already contemplating it is neither here nor there. What I'm happy about is that it is the opposition that has brought it up. Because one of the reasons why we are very cautious in advancing it is that we know that once you put this out, even though you will hear people up front say, oh, this is a good move, you know that there are going to be issues raised about data security and privacy, issues to do with the digital infrastructure to carry it, because it is a very extensive system. So before you can even move such a system, you have to put in place something called public key infrastructure. You have to have they talk about today's world, you require data centers. You will need some very serious data centers, not just cloud data storage, but you have to have local data storage here. So there is a lot of work already being done to put us in a position to layer on this whole business of electronic invoicing. I'm therefore happy that we can say that there is consensus across the aisle that this is something that we must do. The Data Protection Act is already in place. All the work that we have done through NIDS and creating the ICT Authority, all of those come together to form what is necessary to build the system for electronic invoicing. The opposition's second suggestion is that we should just borrow a little more, literally. The budget does involve significant additional borrowing, but there is a fundamental difference between borrowing that builds and borrowing that burdens. The government is committed to ensuring that every dollar of additional debt is deployed as capital investment in infrastructure that increases our productivity, in systems that strengthen our resilience, in projects that grow the economy and generate the future earnings from which the debt can be repaid. Madam Speaker, the opposition spokesman also said that introducing new taxes at this time of economic downturn is pro-cyclical. That is, it tightens fiscal policy precisely when the economy needs room to breathe. That argument would have some validity if the government were using these tax measures to run a surplus, to extract more from the economy than we are putting back in. But that is not what is happening. Even with these additional tax revenues, we are projecting a fiscal deficit. This is why we have suspended the fiscal rules. This year, the government is planning to spend significantly more than it is collecting. So technically, Madam Speaker, we are putting more money into the economy. And when a government runs a deficit, it is by definition, or should be provide, depending on what it does with the funds, provide a net stimulus to the economy. It is injecting more into the circular flow of economic activity than it is withdrawing. That is not a pro-cyclical policy, it is counter-cyclical. Madam Speaker, I ask this House to pause and consider a sobering question. Where would Jamaica be today if we had listened to those who, during COVID, urged us to deplete our reserves, abandon our fiscal anchors, and spend without restraint? Where would we be standing now? Not only in the aftermath of the largest disaster in our nation's history, but also facing a fresh wave of global uncertainty driven by rising energy prices, supply chain disruption, and the conflict in the Middle East. Just imagine if we had arrived at this moment with empty buffers, exhausted credibility, and a debt burden already spiraling out of control. We would have had nothing left to give, no capacity to lend $150 million US to the JPS, no space to provide $10 billion in grants through the ROOFs program, no credibility to mobilize US $6.7 billion from our development partners. The light would still be off, there would be no water, and Jamaica would be at the mercy of circumstances rather than in control of them. Madam Speaker, the public sector wage bill now poses a fiscal risk. Over the past 3 fiscal years, this government has undertaken a comprehensive restructuring of public sector wages and salaries. This reform was necessary and long overdue. Over the preceding decade, a gap between public and private sector compensation had grown to a point where the public service was struggling to attract and retain the talent needed to serve our citizens effectively. The restructuring was designed not only to reduce the gap, but to simplify the pay system and bring greater transparency to how public servants are compensated. The results have been significant. The vast majority of workers have received meaningful increases in their take-home pay. However, we must be clear about what this has meant for our public finances. As a result of the compensation reform, the wage bill has risen by approximately 3.7 percentage points of GDP, and now stands at around 13.8% of GDP in 2025-2026, coming from our target previously of 9%. Prior to this reform, public sector wages accounted for 36 cents of every dollar of tax revenue collected. Today, that figure stands at 49 cents. That is a profound shift in the structure of public expenditure, and it demands that we must be careful in how we press for further increases. Madam Speaker, this present juncture in our history requires a different approach to wage negotiations. The government, through consistent inflation targeting, has ensured price stability in the market. Inflation can no longer be the sole driving force for wage demands. Further increases must now be linked to productivity and GDP growth. Increases that are disconnected from productivity gains and GDP growth will not result in higher standard of living and higher wages. They will result in inflation, which erodes the very purchasing power those increases were meant to protect. I recognize that this settlements. Madam Speaker, macroeconomic stability has anchored us through every storm, and the government will keep Jamaica firmly anchored. Madam Speaker, the other critical enabling factor is managing crime and violence. The number of murders recorded in Jamaica declined from 1,147 in 2024 to 673 in 2025, 43% reduction in a single year. The first time in 31 years that Jamaica's murder toll has fallen below 700. And the momentum has not stopped. Between January 1 and March 14, murders have declined by a further 29.4% compared to the same period last year. So we are about what, 20?
22.
We are 22 as of yesterday?
Today.
As of today. So we are 19 days, 22 murders.
1.1.
So we are not doing too badly.
But you go below 500.
We will make it.
Below 400.
We will make it below 500. This is clear evidence that sustained intelligence-led security operations and deliberate legislative and institutional strengthening are transforming our national security landscape. This progress has been facilitated by strategic use of emergency measures to give our security forces the time and space to develop their capabilities and at the same time attenuate growing problems. We can safely say, as it is visible for all Jamaicans to see, that we have increased the capabilities of our security forces, and they are now far superior to the capabilities of organized criminal elements in the society. The state must have the best intelligence, the best communication, the best transportation, and the best tactical equipment and weapons to eliminate and deter criminal threats. But we have also been ensuring that the state forces use these capabilities according to the law with respect for human rights, compassion for victims, and protection of the vulnerable. Critical component of this performance has been an all-out assault on gangs spearheaded by the Joint Anti-Gang Task Force. Gangs are the engine of Jamaica's violent crime. They control territory, they traffic narcotics, they extort communities, and they kill. Dismantling them is not a policing challenge, it is a national security imperative. Madam Speaker, in the coming financial year, the JDF will move forward with the establishment of Camp Warwicker, a forward operating base on approximately 100 acres of land at an estimated cost of $5 billion. The forward operating base will enhance the JDF territorial dominance of the Ligani Plains through enhanced strategic communications and situational awareness. But it is also a resilience building measure, Madam Speaker, because as Newcastle becomes an aged camp, we have to find other strategic locations where we can house our defense force. And so Camp Warwicker is going to be, yes, above you there, yes. So Camp Warwicker is going to become the new base and location for the JDF. Over time. Well, I mean, the leader of the opposition asked a question, are we giving up camp? I mean, you will always have a footprint in Upper Camp. It's not possible to totally demobilize, but we don't speak publicly about national security issues like that, but you always need the higher ground. You always need the higher ground. Madam Speaker, this budget deepens Jamaica's strategic transition from reactive crisis management to persistent readiness, from crime suppression to sustained reduction, from fragmented border oversight to coherent domain awareness. It supports investments in layered surveillance, expanded radar coverage, UAV, unmanned aerial vehicle capacity, and persistent maritime domain awareness to ensure Jamaica never has to choose between disaster response and border security. Madam Speaker, gang-driven violence is only one dimension of the challenge. There is also the social violence that pervades daily life, domestic violence, child abuse, violence in schools and institutions. These are deeply embedded in our social fabric and will not be resolved by security operations alone. It is precisely this broader understanding that led this government to rename the Ministry of National Security as the Ministry of National Security and Peace, a deliberate signal that our mandate extends beyond crime suppression to active, sustained cultivation of peace in communities. Madam Speaker, the leader of the opposition in his presentation pointed to the breakdown of the moral fiber of the society. This is something I've also spoken to on numerous occasions. It is something that the government must address. Civil society must address. It is becoming a real threat to our civilization. The level of incivility, crassness, bad behavior, dysregulation, it is troubling. And it is not just a social issue, it is an economic issue. Because, if you have behavioral problems in schools, you will have behavioral problems in the workplace. And therefore, Madam Speaker, it is a problem that must be addressed. And so at some point, myself and the leader of the opposition will sit down to see how best there can be a joint approach to treating with this problem. Madam Speaker, for decades, Jamaicans have worked hard. Our people are resilient, entrepreneurial, and industrious. Yet too often, the rewards of that hard work have not been translated into rising incomes at the pace of citizens' expectations. The reason is not effort. It's not that people aren't working hard. Yes, people are working hard. The reason is that people are not working productively. There's a big difference. And let me be precise about the meaning of productivity, because this is one of those words that is often used but rarely understood. Productivity in its simplest form is the value produced per hour of work, not how hard you work, not how long you work, the value of what each hour produces. Madam Speaker, the International Labour Organization data shows that Jamaica produces approximately US $8.81 of output per hour work, adjusted for purchasing power. Let me be clear, Madam Speaker, this is not a judgment on Jamaican workers. It is a diagnosis of our economic structure. And I want the members of Parliament and those watching online to see it, that this is how Jamaica stacks up against the world and against the region. For the Caribbean, it is 21 US dollars. per hour work, Jamaica is 8.81. Now, some persons may say, well, it's because you get a low wage while there is low output. The two things aren't always correlated, but there is an agreement that you have to increase wages to induce an incentive to work hard. So there is some merit to the argument that, you know, our wages are too low. But there is still a problem as to why is it that the effort that we put out does not yield more productivity, more output. And a large part of it, I don't want to divert from my script too much, but some of it is social. You know, we confuse service with servitude. A lot of it is behavioral, as we were speaking about. You know, how we respond to authority, punctuality, to task, you know, having a kind of economistic mindset. Skills are a big part of it, which I'm going to go on to address. But, Madam Speaker, the graph now being displayed shows that Jamaica's GDP per hour work compared to the Caribbean and Latin America and the global middle income benchmarks at just $9 per hour. Jamaica is less than half of the Caribbean average of $20.5 US per hour, as well as upper income countries in Latin America at US $21.10. And far below the high income Latin American and Caribbean countries, which produce nearly $40 per hour. And if you look at our labor productivity across selected Caribbean countries, you will see that, again, Jamaica is amongst the lowest. But I want attention to Panama and the Dominican Republic, because those are the countries that, and Trinidad and Tobago, that you would consider our peer groups that we would have to compete against. And that essentially tells you what our problem is. When we look at the graph now being displayed, which compares Jamaica with our Caribbean and regional peers, the picture becomes even clearer. Countries like Barbados, St. Lucia, Suriname, and the Dominican Republic cluster at between $22 to $26 per hour. Trinidad and Tobago exceeds that at $31 per hour. The Bahamas reaches $35 US per hour, and Panama is at $43 US per hour. Jamaica is at $8.81 per hour, sits near the bottom of the regional distribution, just above Haiti. We must address the problem of productivity. Madam Speaker, the government is developing a policy position on how to improve our low level of productivity, and I will come to this House at a later date to present this in detail. The issues of productivity is not just a matter of wages and remuneration, but also a matter of culture and socialization. Madam Speaker, every ambition and every goal in my presentation today, every road we build, every industry we grow, every technology we deploy, will ultimately be delivered by people. I have said it many times, and I say it again with the same conviction. Jamaica's greatest asset is our people, not our location, not our resources, not our brand, as powerful as it is. Our investment in people is central to our economic strategy. Madam Speaker, if we are serious about competing in a tech-driven, AI-enabled global economy, we cannot educate our children for a world that no longer exists. We must build institutions that prepare them for the world of today, and more importantly, to compete globally in the world of tomorrow. I'm proud to announce that we will break ground this year on 2 of the 6 STEM schools that I had announced previously. The first will be established at Bernard Lodge in St. Catherine, and the second at Minard in St. Anne. Simultaneously, NARA will be building the other 4 STEM institutions that will take students from early childhood straight through to secondary education, immersing them in STEM from the earliest years right through to the door of our tertiary institution. These schools will bring an entirely new approach to the education system, exposing students to science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics in ways that build the creativity, innovation, and problem-solving skills that the economy of the future demands. Madam Speaker, my administration is a listening one, and we consulted our university students, leading to develop a work experience program that works for them. Starting in the upcoming financial year, the Heart NST Trust will introduce a pilot of the tertiary Learning, Earning, and Prosper LEAP program to widen pathways from tertiary education to employment by providing paid on-the-job experience. Students of accredited tertiary institutions as participants of the tertiary LEAP program will be able to engage in meaningful work in the public sector and participating private companies. As they work, they will receive a competitive part-time compensation package. LEAP is an opportunity for students to continue learning while HEART places them in employment of their choice so they can earn an income and garnering valuable experience. I must recognize the president of the University of the West Indies Guild of Students, Mr. Rashawn Winter, and the president of the University of Technology Students Union, Mr. Percival Roberts, and their teams for serving as the brains of this initiative. This is how my administration makes policy. We first listen to those who serve, then we act collaboratively. I thank these student leaders for putting pen to paper, bringing their ideas forward, leading every step of the way, and working with us to develop the program. Madam Speaker, the National Reconstruction Program under NARA will require thousands of skilled tradespeople, carpenters, electricians, plumbers, masons, roofers, and the capacity to train them at scale and at speed. Madam Speaker, the Heart Trust NSTA will train construction-related tradespersons who can assist in the Building and Resilience Initiative, as well as propelling the expansion of various sectors. Madam Speaker, we are launching a contractor incubator program, placing selected graduates from Heart and UTech on a guided development pathway with access to technical assistance, advanced training, and concessional financing through the Development Bank of Jamaica to purchase equipment and scale their operations. The intent is to have Jamaicans gain experience on high-value public infrastructure projects and transition faster into sustainable employment and enterprise. Madam Speaker, I like this project because essentially what it is saying, it is an incubator for a new generation of contractors. Contractors are critical to the utilization of the capital budget. Madam Speaker, I was proud to bring the Heart Trust NSTA closer to Prime Minister Siaga's vision when we eliminated tuition fees up to level 4. Since then, Heart's doors have been open to more than 500,000 young and not so young men and women island. Our mission to expand access to opportunity through skills training is not yet complete. I shall complete that in the coming financial year. Tuitions for all Heart NSTA Trust programs up to level 5, note that this is a bachelor's degree, will be abolished for Jamaicans in the most challenging circumstances. Heart will become free from level 1 to 5 for those who need it most, because my administration understands how important it is to continuously improve access to skills training and give every Jamaican a clear pathway to prosperity. Madam Speaker, the most powerful classroom is the workplace, and the most effective instructor is experience. The apprenticeship model, learning, doing, earning while training, developing under the guidance of industry professionals, is one of the most proven pathways to skill development. Last year, I announced the CARE program, where each member of parliament could nominate young men and women who were not engaged in work, the proverbial youth on the corner. Through CARE, this administration provided training pathways while providing stipend and transportation support. Madam Speaker, a CARE graduate from the Gregory Park area is here with us today. Kimberly Ashley is in the gallery. As a young trainee, Mr. Ashley joined the CARE program and was assigned to Gully trading. Through the CARE program, he completed his level 2 certification in business administration with stipend support and transportation support. He gained valuable knowledge, employment skills, and real-world experience that has helped in his next steps. Mr. Ashby is now a full-time employee at Gully Trading. The recovery and reconstruction effort is not only rebuilding homes, it is rebuilding futures. Janie Freighter from Barton District in St. Elizabeth is with us today. He is one of the young Jamaicans participating in the Bridge program, building resilience and inspiring development through guided experience, learning modern construction techniques on the job, working alongside JDF teams and international engineering partners in our western parishes. His story is the story of what this program can do, turning work of recovery into the foundation of a career. Madam Speaker, this new on-the-job training approach to skills training has demonstrated results, and we are now mainstreaming these lessons in our HEART programs, especially in construction, manufacturing, and logistics through partnerships with the IDB. Madam Speaker, I'm particularly happy about this because we have asked the JDF and HEART to partner together to ensure that while we are restoring the roofs, that we are training the young men and women, because we are to need them during the reconstruction. This is what resurgence looks like in human terms. Jamaicans skilled, employed, earning, building. Jamaicans who no longer have to look beyond our shores to find a future worthy of their talent. Madam Speaker, I want to speak briefly about beach access. A planning issue which has been contentious for several decades is beach access. Leader of the opposition raised it in his presentation. Every administration has committed to creating a policy framework to improve and increase Jamaica's access to our beaches. Today, I am tabling Jamaica's new beach access policy. The Beach Control Act of 1956 and its amendments in 1973 did not adequately address beach access issues and will have to be replaced, and the new policy is the first step in that direction. The policy focuses on developing a modern, inclusive definition of a beach and definition of the foreshore, backshore, and water shelf, outlining how the government will improve access, outlining the required legislative amendments, and outlining changes to the consideration for new development approval. Madam Speaker, another element of the policy is developing a framework around investments in man-made or constructed beaches. At the time of the 1956 Act, man-made beaches were not contemplated. I mean, obviously man-made beaches have been around a long time, but it was contemplated as an endeavor in Jamaica. I think now we have to integrate that into a new framework of managing our beaches. So the policy, Madam Speaker, affirms government's commitment to ensuring that Jamaicans have access to their natural public assets in an orderly, safe, equitable, and sustainable way. Madam Speaker, we want to once and for all end any ambiguity, dispute, or any view that Jamaicans are being dispossessed and disconnected from accessing their beaches. Madam Speaker, last year, we signaled our intention to continue the journey from a minimum wage to a livable wage. And we indicated that the next step would be to increase the minimum wage to $18,500. However, in the aftermath of Hurricane Melissa, many of our businesses are rebuilding, many households are still recovering, and the economy is now navigating yet again another external shock in terms of energy prices and shipping costs. In this context, the government believes it is important to strike the right balance by continuing to improve earnings of workers while recognizing the realities employers face. We did propose a measured increase in the minimum wage from $16,000 to $17,000 effective July 1, 2026. This does not represent a departure from our long-term policy objective. The government remains committed to transition from a minimum wage to a livable wage. And as economic conditions stabilize, we will continue the phased increase necessary to realize that vision of the Jamaican worker. So, Madam Speaker, July 1, 2026, the minimum wage will move from $16,000 to $17,000. We continue to make the investment in lifting wage levels because ultimately we are going to have to address the productivity issue. Madam Speaker, we are not a nation that has had it easy. We are a people forged in the fire of history, shaped by struggle and suffering. We know in our bones, in our blood, in the memory carried across generations, what it is to be tested. Slavery could not break us. Colonialism could not diminish us. Poverty could not extinguish us. Debt could not define us. COVID could not stop us. Hurricane Gilbert could not silence us. And Hurricane Melissa, the most powerful storm this earth is capable of producing, could not and did not defeat us. Beyond any doubt, we have proven resilience as a nation. But resilience, Madam Speaker, is not our destination. Our test now is the harder one, the test of whether we have the vision to see in the rubble of what was the foundation of what can be. The test of whether we are bold enough, disciplined enough, united enough to take everything we have endured and turn it into everything we deserve. To not merely survive, but to soar, to thrive, to move deliberately, decisively, and together from resilience to resurgence. Madam Speaker, I believe we are equal to that task. I know that we are equal to that test. I believe it because from the farmer I met in Westmoreland, standing in a field stripped bare by Melissa, he is already talking about how he is going to prepare for his next harvest. I believe it because of the mother who cleared rubble with her hands so that her children would have somewhere to sleep, not waiting to be rescued, not surrender to despair, simply doing what Jamaican mothers have done across every generation of our history. I believe it because the young entrepreneur who lost everything, but who is ready to start again. These are not exceptional Jamaicans, they are the typical Jamaicans. And that is the most powerful thing I can say about this country. Jamaica's greatness has never been in our size or our resources. It has always been in our people. The fastest humans on earth are ours. The most recognized music in the world is ours. The most resilient spirit in the world is ours. Madam Speaker, history will record that Melissa was the strongest storm to ever strike the island, but history will also record something else, that the Jamaican people, that the people of Jamaica were stronger than the storm of Melissa. We have proven that we can withstand. Now it is time to show the world that we can build. A Jamaica where every Jamaican in every parish, in every town, in every community on this beloved island can look at their country and say with pride and with certainty, this place was built for me and by me. And I was built for this place. That is the Jamaica we are building. Madam Speaker, this remarkable, irrepressible, godless island of our beloved Jamaica is rising. Resurgence is not a promise. Resurgence is not a promise we are making to Jamaica. It is our destiny, and we are claiming it together. May God be our refuge and guide in restoring what the storm took away. And may what we build in its place be greater in strength, richer in justice, more beautiful in spirit, and more Jamaican than anything that came before. Thank you. And may God today and every day continue to bless Jamaica. God, we know. Hold on.
Just let you know, excellent presentation. Heart is also training senior citizens in digital. I said, okay, all right, but one of them is here.
House Leader, thank you.
Madam Speaker, we thank the Prime Minister for his visionary and comprehensive presentation. Reminding us, Madam Speaker, that we are in safe hands as we chart the course forward. Madam Speaker, we do have some matters to treat with before we leave, in keeping with the Prime Minister's presentation. So I ask for the recommittal of I ask for the suspension of the debate and the recommittal of announcements and notices of motions.
Thank you, House Leader. The question is that the budget debate be suspended until the 24th of March, 2026. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. The request was also for the recommittal of announcements and notices of motion given orally. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Announcements, Clerk.
Laid on the table of the House are the following. The Beach Access and Management Policy for Jamaica, dated March 2026, and its related Ministry Paper number 20 of 2026, titled Beach Access and Management Policy for Jamaica, from the Office of the Prime Minister. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Notices of motions given orally. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move to introduce and have read a first time a bill shortly entitled the National Reconstruction and Resilience Authority Act 2026.
Thank you, Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, it is not intended to do any further business today. We will reconvene on Tuesday, when we will close the budget debate with our Minister of Finance, the Honourable Favour Williams. As such, I move for Parliament to be adjourned until Tuesday, March 24 at 2 p.m.
Thank you, House Leader. Members, the question is that, oh, we're so noisy today. Members, the question is that the House do now adjourn for Tuesday, March 24th, 2026 at 2 p.m. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. This Honorable House now stands adjourned.